Coming up in our newscast tonight. As we await details of the upcoming meetings between the leaders of the two Koreas, Seoul opens up on the possibility of a change from the initial agreement in terms of the venue for the summit. A probe to find out if North Korean resources have been illegally brought to the nation is complete. 7 cases involve document fabrication to hide the origin of the goods. Steady growth for 9 straight months. That's the good news coming from the Finance Ministry based on its Green Book about employment issues and the ongoing trade war could affect those numbers. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. When President Moon Jae-in and his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un first met in April, it was agreed another session will be held over in Pyongyang. And now we're learning they are open to other options. Venue, among other details, are things that could be worked out in next Monday's high-level talks. Shin Se-min starts us off from the nation's top office.
Potential locations for the summit are not limited to the North Korean capital of Pyongyang, is what the spokesperson for the South Korean presidential office said Friday, while fielding questions about the meeting tentatively scheduled for this fall. The joint declaration from the first summit in April states that the summit should happen in the regime's capital, but the Blue House spokesperson's remarks open up the possibility that the North might suggest other locations. He then tossed a ball to the officials attending next Monday's high-level talks, saying the details of the summit, including the locations the North prefers, will be narrowed down by them. Despite agreeing in April to a Pyongyang summit, President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un went ahead with a surprise meeting in May at the truce village of Panmunjom, but that time on the northern side. As for the third summit's date, the spokesman said that'll be sketched out after Monday's talks, commenting that it's too early to discuss the schedule in detail. The top office confirmed that the delegations for Monday, although still being worked out, will include a representative from the Blue House. And while prepping for those talks, the spokesperson says the governments of South Korea and the U.S. are in close consultations on issues like the declaration of the formal end to the Korean War. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Staying with Monday's high-level talks, some speculate the third round of InterKorean summit could take place much earlier than initially agreed upon, judging by the timing of North Korea's request to hold the meeting between high-ranking officials. For details, let's turn to our Oh Jung-hee.
The two Koreas are holding their fourth round of high-level talks on Monday to plan their third summit of the year. What's noteworthy is that it was North Korea that called for the meeting. That raises the question, why does Pyongyang need a high-level meeting with Seoul now, specifically pointing to the possibility of holding the Inter-Korean summit much sooner than initially scheduled in the fall? Experts suggest North Korea may want to urge South Korea to be more involved in alleviating the international sanctions and in successfully declaring a formal end to the Korean War within this year, which would likely lower military pressure on the regime.
North Korea could be looking to increase exchanges with South Korea to overcome the difficulties it faces from the U.S. sanctions and pressure campaign. Also, Pyongyang could urge Seoul to push Washington to declare an end to the Korean War.
Pyongyang has recently ramped up criticisms against Washington for still keeping pressure high despite the North's, quote, goodwill actions. On Friday, Pyongyang's foreign ministry issued a statement that denounced Washington for intensifying sanctions despite Pyongyang halting nuclear missile tests, dismantling a nuclear test site, and repatriating the remains of America's war dead. It called on the U.S. to respond in a corresponding manner. A source familiar with Inter-Korean affairs told Arirang News on Friday, North Korea may lash out at South Korea regarding sanctions. Monday's talks won't be easy. to find a breakthrough when it stalled negotiations with the U.S. on denuclearization and ending the Korean War, it seemed that North Korea could have called for this high-level meeting to pressure South Korea to take a greater role in mediating between Pyongyang and Washington. 오정희, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, Seoul's government completed an investigation into what was suspected to be illegal imports of coal from North Korea. The results don't look good. According to our Lee Ji-won, some of the cases violate UNSC sanctions.
South Korea's Customs Service revealed at a briefing on Friday that North Korean coal and pig iron have in fact been brought into the country illegally. 3 South Korean firms were found to have broken the law in 7 of the 9 cases. Most of them involved the fabrication of documents about the goods' origin.
After the UN Security Council banned the trading of North Korean coal, the suspects transshipped the North Korean product at a Russian port onto a vessel with a third country's flag and forged documents to make it look like the goods were from Russia.
Inspections of Russian coal in particular have gotten tougher because of the sanctions. So in one case, the company said falsely that the coal was of a type that doesn't require a certificate of origin at all. Between April and October last year, they brought in a total of 35,000 tons of North Korean coal and pig iron, worth some 6.6 billion won, or about $5.8 million. Most of the coal had been acquired by the suspects as commission for selling North Korean coal to third-party countries. It's thought the reason they did it was because coal from the north is so cheap. This is a clear violation of UN Security Council Resolution 2371, which stipulates that North Korea shall not supply, sell, or transfer directly or indirectly coal, iron, or iron ore, and that all UN member states shall prohibit the procurement of such material from the north. The Korea Customs Service said it'll refer the firms and their representatives to the prosecution. And the ships that brought in the coal, including Shinning Rich and the Jinlong, will be reported to the Security Council Committee on North Korea sanctions, but it's not clear whether the ships will face sanctions themselves. Either way, the South Korean government said it'll ban them from its ports. As for a local company that bought and used the coal, the Customs Service said it's likely to be exempted from the United States secondary boycott because it could not have known the coal's origin. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Next week, the two Koreas will begin joint road inspections. It should have kicked off today with roughly 30 officials and experts from Seoul planning to cross the border this morning. But Pyongyang suggested a delay late Thursday night without giving a clear reason. Come Monday, they will inspect the Gyeonggi Road that runs along the west coast and then check the Donghae Road along the east coast. The two sides agreed during talks in June to modernize the sections between the North Korean cities of Kaesong and Pyongyang, as well as the west coast roads between South Korea's Goseong and the regime's Wonsan. A delegation from North Korea arrived in Seoul today to take part in football matches between labor union members from both sides. A press conference this afternoon followed by a welcoming banquet. The matches will kick off at 4 p.m. Saturday local time at Sangam World Cup Stadium in front of an expected 30,000 spectators. There will be 2 games, each an hour long. The last time the two sides' workers played such InterKorean friendlies was way back in 2007. There are growing concerns Washington and Pyongyang may be experiencing some turbulence in terms of communication. The U.S. State Department begs to differ, though, claiming the two sides have been keeping in close contact. Kan Young will help us read between the lines.
The United States and North Korea are talking, quote, virtually every day. U.S. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said on Thursday that Washington and Pyongyang continue to have conversations on a daily basis. She even mentioned the different ways they exchange views, saying conversations are happening by phone, message, and email. Asked if the two sides are planning another high-level gathering in the near future, the spokesperson said there were no meetings nor travel plans to announce at the present time. Her remarks come as U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton said earlier this week that President Trump recently sent a personal letter to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un offering to send Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Pyongyang again to keep the denuclearization talks going. However, the State Department's latest comments on communication between the U.S. and North Korea come amid rising concerns the denuclearization process has slowed to a snail's pace since the North Korea-U.S. summit in June. 간영우, Arirang News.
South Korea launched a research facility which will focus on Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. The center was inaugurated today by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. It will build a database on the atrocity with records from within and outside the nation, and also translate testimonies of the victims to prevent historic distortion globally. The center also aims to contribute to helping future generations correctly understand the issue. It was only last year that Park Geun-hye became the first democratically elected South Korean leader to be impeached. President Moon Jae-in emphasized the government still has a long way to go until winning back the people's trust. Here's what he told 5 of the so-called next in command during a working lunch today.
우리 정부는 정부대로, 또 국회는 국회대로, 사법부는 사법부대로 국민들 신뢰를 되찾기 위해서 해야 될 과제들이 많은 것 같습니다. 이렇게 우리 국민들이 바라는 민주주의의 성숙을 위해서도 함께 이렇게 노력해 나가자라는 그런 당부 말씀을 드리겠습니다.
The South Korean leader called for the 5 officials support in revitalizing the country's economy as it faces multiple challenges. It was the 4th such meeting since he took office last May, and the first time the newly inaugurated parliamentary speaker, Moon Hye-sang, joined in alongside Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun, Supreme Court Chief Justice Kim Young-soo, Constitutional Court Chief Justice Lee Jin-sung, and Kwon Sun-il, the chair of the National Election Commission. Seoul posted a budget surplus this year thanks to increased tax revenue from corporations and individuals, as well as VAT. Data from the Ministry of Economy and Finance show the country's tax revenue amounted to nearly $139.4 billion during the first half, some $17 billion more compared to the same period last year. Of that, nearly $36 billion was collected in corporate tax, which reflects business performance. Income tax revenue also rose almost $6 billion on year to $39.3 billion, while the value-added tax revenue climbed to nearly $31 billion. That's $1.5 billion more than 2017. The local economy is seeing steady growth thanks to robust exports. But then there are concerns over weak employment figures and how the ongoing trade war between Washington and Beijing could impact the nation. Won Jung-hwan zooms in on the government's Green Book.
South Korea's economy has seen steady growth for 9 straight months on the back of a rebound in exports. According to the Ministry of Economy and Finance's monthly Economic Green Book report on Friday, South Korea's outbound shipments jumped 6.2% in July from a year earlier. Exports have been steeply increasing since November 2016, led by a spike in global demand for steel and semiconductors. But while the economy is maintaining its export-led recovery, consumer sentiment deteriorates and capital spending and the job market face sluggish growth. Facility investments dipped 5.9% on months in June, and the number of newly added jobs stayed slightly above 100,000 per month over the past 5 months, keeping the employment rate at just 67%, unchanged from the same period in 2017. And according to an expert, South Korea will be even more dependent on exports unless domestic consumption and employment growth picks up.
Korean economy in July seemed to be more or less holding steady. Exports are continuing to do very well, but the domestic economy is not really picking up. Consumption was a little better, and so was employment. But the growth in consumption is not as high as we were hoping, and investment is not doing well at all. So Korean economy is becoming more dependent on good exports.
The latest economic forecast also highlighted increasing uncertainties stemming from the growing trade spat between the U.S. and China. And experts worry that as those countries are Korea's 2 largest trading partners, the trade spat could hit Korean exports. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
The global market for dynamic random access memory chips is forecast to grow to reach $100 billion for the first time this year. Our Kim Jun explains how this trend will affect semiconductor industries currently dominated by Korean manufacturers.
A report released by semiconductor market research firm IC Insight shows global sales of DRAMs to grow 39% compared to last year to record $101.6 billion of sales this year. That's $2 billion higher than the firm's previous report released in March. DRAMs and NAND flash memory chips make up a combined 38% of the total semiconductor market, estimated at $428 billion. Korean chip makers Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix together take up more than 70% of the global semiconductor market share, and their sales of chips play a big part in the company's profit earnings. Samsung Electronics revealed last month that second quarter operating profit rose by nearly 6% on year to $13.3 billion, the lion's share of that coming from its chip unit. SK Hynix also posted all-time high operating profits of $9.2 billion in Q2 and announced plans to build a new semiconductor fabrication plant at its headquarters in Icheon, southeast of Seoul, to cope with the rising demand. A local expert says prospects are good for the country's semiconductor exports in the latter half of this year as well, with unit prices expected to stay steady.
Trade tensions between the U.S. and China are expected to have a limited impact on Korea's chip shipments, since its biggest market is China. It could, however, affect Korea's chip shipments, where parts are sent to China to be assembled before being exported to the U.S.
Data released by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy last month shows Korea's semiconductor exports increased for the third consecutive month in July, surpassing $10 billion, the fourth highest monthly record ever. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Physically, Koreans are provided some relief by the recent rain, but the prolonged heat wave had a crushing impact on the nation's economy. Cost of food products as well as gasoline and electricity all shot up. Our Ko Ryuni breaks down the digits for us.
The owner of this whole restaurant, Kim Hae-soo, says this summer was particularly brutal for his business. As Korea reached the hottest temperature it's ever recorded, the price of vegetables soared, which means Kim's menu has been a lot more expensive to make.
I feel like vegetable prices have risen more than threefold recently because of the hot weather. I hope the heat wave ends soon so I can buy ingredients at a normal price.
Data from the Korea Consumer Agency earlier this week showed vegetable prices had jumped by 5.4% as of August 3rd from just a week earlier. Cabbage prices rose the most by 41.2%, followed by spinach and Napa cabbage. And it's not just vegetables. Fruit prices are also rising. Here at a supermarket in Seoul, one watermelon costs around $20, which is more than a 20% increase from last month's average price.
When fruit was cheap, I would buy a lot, but because it's so expensive now, I tend to eat less fruit.
There are also more areas now covered by agricultural insurance programs, which compensate for crop damage. A property insurance company says the area covered was around 321,000 hectares for all of last year. But that figure was already surpassed as of the end of July.
When farmers sign up for insurance, they have to pay a certain premium. On average, the central and local governments pay for 80% of it, and farmers pay 20%.
Another burden has been soaring rates for fuel and electricity. Korean National Oil Corporation says the average price of gasoline in the first week of August was around $1.43 a liter, the highest so far this year. To help with the cost of electricity, the government has reduced the rate for household use for July and August. A household of 4 using 350 kilowatt hours of power in a month would only have to pay around $58, down 25.5% from the normal rate. Ko Ryuni, Arirang News.
Mild precipitation in recent days was a welcome change, of course, but it's clear we need to do something to prevent the mercury from climbing higher each year as the heat waves are set to only get worse. Oh Se-young turned to some experts for their insights.
The scorching temperatures may be subsiding for now, but future heat waves could be stronger than ever. According to global climate experts, this summer, which is set to become the fourth hottest on record, has raised alarm bells over the future of our planet.
We've seen not just the heat waves in Japan, in Korea, in Europe, but we've seen wildfires in Greece, in Spain, Portugal, clearly visible from space. We've seen an increase in heat-related mortality, changes in agriculture, all these things. You know, this summer is a classic summer of what we're trying to avoid.
Many experts have warned that heat waves across the world are likely to grow more frequent and intense in the years to come, with the average global temperature largely predicted to increase over the next few decades. The Earth has already seen a 1 degree Celsius increase since pre-industrial times, which scientists say is a clear sign that climate change is caused by greenhouse gas emissions. The 197-nation Paris Climate Agreement, signed in 2015, pledges efforts to restrict further warming of the Earth to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But without the cooperation of major carbon emitters like the United States and a lack of localized measures, scientists say it's unlikely that the target can be met.
We do have the technology to stabilize temperatures at 1.5 degrees, mainly through something called negative emission technologies. So that's taking carbon dioxide directly out of the air and storing it. So it can be done. It's a geophysical possibility to do it, but it's the politicians we need to sort of convince.
In addition to carbon-reducing policies, experts say governments must prepare disaster response measures to protect socially vulnerable people in particular.
Thousands of people in France who died from the heatwave in 2003 were elderly, children or the socially weak. We need proper shelters and medical centres available to respond and take care of them when deadly heatwaves break out.
Without decisive human action, recent studies have warned the world may see a tipping point into unbearably hot conditions, or a hothouse Earth phenomenon, where global temperatures stabilise around 4 to 5 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial levels. Oh Se-young, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now. For 3 months, Seoul plays a host to special event every Saturday night. Residents are invited to beat the heat with a stunning riverside view of the capital. Our Se-young shows us what the Hangang River Night Tour Festival has to offer.
At around 8 p.m., a tour guide introduces a group of sightseers to Seoul Island, a man-made island located on the southern part of Seoul's Hangang River. Through individual earpieces, the guide narrates the history of the island and river. The tour guide then takes the group to another man-made island called Sebit Island, more decorated with colorful lights than Seoul Island. Sebit means 3 colors, and the island is really a group of 3 smaller islands that resemble a flower when viewed from above. The stunning views mesmerize sightseers.
I hope people enjoy the night view of Hangang River and experience the beauty of light.
At last, the guide ushers the group to their final destination, the Moonlight Rainbow Fountain on the Pampo Bridge that straddles the Hangang River. The fountain has 380 nozzles spraying rainbow-illuminated jets of water high into the air. Around 200 lights shining on the fountain add to the allure of the scenery.
The tour was really exciting. I will definitely come again, and I'll highly recommend it to others.
The Moonlight Rainbow Fountain is one of the highlights of the Hangang River Night Tour. People flock here to beat the heat and enjoy the summer nights. The tour will run every Saturday night until October. So why not add a river tour to your evening stroll along the Hangang River? Se-young, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Buck at the Weather Center for the updates you need before planning your weekend. Michelle, I hear more showers are in the forecast this weekend.
Daniel, although the sky has cleared up here in the capital, rain will fall all night long over Gangwon province and the southern regions. By tomorrow, these regions should expect more precipitation between 5 and 40 millimeters. Now, meanwhile, the North Pacific high-pressure front is expected to push Typhoon Yagi further towards China. Now, the storm will pass Jeju waters on Sunday afternoon and enter the eastern sea of China by early next week. The nation's weather conditions will vary depending on the course of this typhoon. Until then, the nation will have a partly cloudy Saturday afternoon, under ongoing heat waves. While Beijing and Tokyo can expect some more rain with some thunder and lightning. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will wake up to 26 degrees Celsius, whereas Daegu is slightly bearable at 24 degrees. Now, Seoul's daily highs reaches up to 35 degrees, and similar readings to today are in the forecast for the rest of the country. Now, besides the sporadic showers, we will remain pretty much the same throughout the weekend. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
These are the stories we could pack into our newscast. Thank you for watching. Here's wishing you an incredible weekend.